Celebration Day at the White House, I see the statement from the president says prices are still too high. But to what extent are you allowed to acknowledge the ground that's been covered here, the progress that's been made?
Well, both things are true. You heard Chair Powell talk about the strength of the economy, but I think we've been out here long enough, you, me, and Kailey, talking about exactly that. We know we have a job market with an unemployment rate that's been 4% or below for 2.5 years, and we know that prices are too high. The question is, what kind of progress are we making? And when we get a month of May with 272,000 jobs, which is the last time I was out here talking to you two, and then followed by an inflation report that was 0 for the month, obviously that's progress on the right track. We have to continue aggressively pushing down costs where we can. Healthcare, childcare, housing, junk fees, while doing all we can to maintain the tightness of the labor market. We are making progress, moving in the right direction, not there yet.
Well, Jared, one of the areas where we're still seeing stickiness is shelter. This is actually something that Chairman Powell was asked about in the press conference today, this idea that higher interest rates potentially are exacerbating the problem in housing. What the chairman said is that the best thing the Fed can do is bring down inflation so it can bring down rates. But if you listen to Democrats like Senator Elizabeth Warren, they think actually it's higher interest rates that are exacerbating the problem and making it more difficult to get inflation down. Which one is it in your economic mind?
Well, in my economic mind, when it comes to housing, the two words that we should all have top of mind are supply shortage. We have a supply shortfall in this economy that has nothing to do with the latest Fed cycle. It's 10 years, at least a decade in the making. Now, this president has a plan to add 2 million units of affordable housing. We also provided pretty extensive rent assistance to folks already, both through the American Rescue Plan and beyond. So we're actively trying to help expand the supply of affordable housing. But boy, do we need Congress to work with us on that one. And there's no way that should be a red, blue, or purple issue. This is an issue. This supply shortfall in affordable housing is active in states across the land. So we have a great plan to do something about it. We need Congress's cooperation.
I want to go back to that comment from Chairman Powell. I don't think anyone has a definitive answer, he said, why people are not as happy about the economy as they might be. And he said it's not his job to find out. But it's kind of your job, Mr. Chairman, and I wonder how you feel about that after a report like this that brought a lot of good news today.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I kind of think it is my job, and that's because it's President Biden really views it as essential to know not just how the economy is doing, but how people are experiencing that. And I thought Chair Powell was spot on when he said, we're not telling anybody how they should think or feel about the economy. They're the best arbiters of their own situation. One of the things that, I've zeroed in on, and I think we've talked about this before, is not just inflation, it's the price level. People still remember what things used to cost. And look, in some areas, we do have costs coming down. The price of gas this morning was 14 cents lower than it was a year ago. I think that's a very positive development, especially when you attach that onto the fact that wages for middle wage workers are up $1.20 over a year ago. So those both work in the right direction. Grocery prices, so salient in this conversation about how people feel about the economy. Here's the last 4 months of grocery prices: 0%, 0%, -0.2%, 0%. That's a great track record that's going to help. But the price level, prices are still too high, is a phrase you hear this president say. You mentioned it in his statement this morning every time he talks about this.
So, Jared, if it is partially your job to understand how people are feeling about the economy, and I know it's not your job to give us an opinion on the level of interest rates, but what kind of economy will you be assessing? How will people be feeling if the level of interest rates is maintained at this level, at least until December? How much worse could people feel by then?
Well, I think the key thing there is to just think about the real variables that matter most to people. Jobs, wages, incomes, okay? So the interest rate is hanging out there, and it is obviously highly influential. We talked about its role in the housing sector a minute ago, and I agree with you, there's ambiguity there. But at the end of the day, when we have an unemployment rate that is as low as this one's been, when we keep adding jobs at a clip that means really robust earnings opportunities for people, and probably most important, paychecks beating prices, okay? For 15 months in a row, 1-5, and we wrote about this morning. You can see it on the CEA blog. For 15 months in a row, yearly pay has grown faster. Yearly hourly wages has outpaced prices. This is for middle wage workers. If you look at middle wage workers over the past year, their pay is up 4.2%. We know this morning inflation 3.3%. We've seen that pattern now for, as I said, 15 months running. If you look at disposable income, adjusting for inflation, it's up $3,700 relative to pre-pandemic. So one of the things that we've been trying to bring to the discussion is we have to pay a tremendous amount of attention to not just inflation, but the price level, continue working to bring down costs. We also have to look at the other side of the ledger, how wages and incomes are growing.